So just like making a first impression can be really daunting, breaking the ice with someone new or someone you don't know for the very first time can also be very difficult, and especially if it's with a foreigner, someone that you don't share a culture with. There are certain things that you can think of in order to break the ice, but the most important thing is to be confident and open and warm, and just maybe make the first move and say hello. And you could possibly ask them how they are, or relate the conversation back to something that you both have shared. For instance, you're sitting in a meeting with somebody that you don't know, and you want to break the ice and get to know them and talk to them for the first time. After the meeting, you can ask them how they felt about the things that were discussed during the meeting. So it doesn't feel so alien, so foreign, and so distant, I suppose. And the other thing is your attitude. Having passion and showing a sense of enthusiasm when you speak to them is really, really useful. And so in this sense, they don't even have to listen to what you're saying as long as they can feel that energy and will want to respond. But the bottom line thing is to be confident and be enthusiastic and be passionate about getting to know someone new for the first time. Certain questions I've noticed are really, really popular in Vietnam when people meet each other for the first time. For instance, people generally ask each other in Vietnam whether or not people are married, or how many children they have, or certain things that are very private and personal. For Western cultures, these questions are best saved until the relationship has grown stronger and closer. So for instance, you shouldn't ask them if they're married or if they have children or things like that. They will bring it up themselves as the conversation progresses. But you should start by just keeping the topic simple and light, asking them about the weather, asking them about what they did maybe during the day, and just paying attention to what they say so that the conversation can expand. But certain questions that are related to one's private life should definitely be avoided until you know the person better and well. There aren't so many written rules about employee-employer relationships. However, you should be aware that with foreign managers, sometimes it could be a little bit jarring if you come across as too close or too friendly. So save those after work dinners or dates. Perhaps when you work with them long enough, you'll find that you naturally become friends at the workplace. So in this case, it just really depends on the situation that you found yourself in and the kind of manager that you have. But as a rule, try to keep a professional distance and wait until things naturally fall together. Your first impressions are very important, and it's crucial to make the right impression with someone that you meet for the first time. And sometimes it could be daunting because you've never met them before, but there are certain things that you can do to help make your first impression go as smoothly as possible. For example, think about your smile, for instance. If you just stand in front of a mirror and practice smiling and frowning, you'll notice that a smile is always more warm and welcoming. So that's the first thing. Smiling is a great way to start new interactions with someone and make your first impression really positive. And the second thing is eye contact. People are always talking about eye contact, but what does it really mean? For me, I think eye contact means that the other person is engaging with you and paying attention to what you're saying. So if I meet someone, I want them to feel the same things. So eye contact. Make sure your eyes are focused on them. Make sure they're not wandering somewhere else. And with eye contact and a smile, I'm sure you'll make the greatest first impression. And another thing is your manner of attitude. For instance, maybe being as professional as you can in the clothing that you wear and the makeup that you use will also create good first impressions.
So when I introduce myself to people, it's different according to if they are a stranger, if they are a person who I think I may become friends with, or if it's in a business capacity. And so the way I introduce myself will be different according to what I expect to get out of knowing them. So when I introduce myself to a stranger who I'm not expecting to know, for example, a waiter or my Grab driver or something like that, I will say hello. Maybe I will tell them my name, maybe I won't. And I wouldn't shake their hand, for example, because I won't know them for very long. So if I'm meeting someone, say a friend of a friend, who I've been introduced to, then maybe I will shake their hand and say, "Hi, my name's Emily, nice to meet you," and we make small talk, which is, very from how old are you, how do you know a person. Maybe talk about the weather, maybe talk about if you're listening to music, then you can talk about music. And if it's in a business capacity, then I'd say, "Hello, my name is Emily." I would always go in for the handshake. I know that some people don't have, they don't like to handshake, maybe because culturally they don't want to, maybe because they are sick or they're worried that the other person is sick and they don't want to spread the disease, like COVID, for example. But yeah, I would always go in for the handshake in a business meeting, or if I'm meeting someone in a formal way. So the worst thing about handshaking is if I put my hand out to shake and the hand is like this, you can't shake the hand because it's floppy, and that's not a good handshake. So if you're going to shake hands, then it needs to be firm. Men meet each other for the first time. They sometimes squeeze too hard to try and establish who's the strongest and stuff like that, but that's unnecessary and juvenile. Yeah, so starting conversations, you make a good point. Yeah, what you need to do is you need to try and find something you have in common, something that you could talk about together. But yeah, so start with hello, what's your name? Sometimes I ask, how are you? Not how old are you, but how are you? Because, I think it's nice to change it up a little bit. It's nice to add something to the conversation. Quite often, one of the first questions that's asked to me is, where are you from? And I don't mind that, because obviously I'm not Vietnamese. So I say I'm from England. But then I can't reciprocate that question because the person asking me is nearly always Vietnamese. And so I can't say, and where are you from? Because they say Vietnam. And it's like, oh, obviously, duh. So if I'm trying to make the conversation go further, because instead of, hello, what's your name, where are you from, and then nothing, I tend to ask, are you from Hanoi? Because that way, the answer can be no, but the answer can be yes. And so, for example, you're not from Hanoi, you're from a different province, so you had something to say about that. And then we could have a conversation based on that, instead of me just asking, are you from Vietnam? Questions not to ask is the next thing up here. I'm a public elementary school teacher. I teach hundreds of children every day, and they ask me all sorts of questions that maybe they shouldn't. And I think obviously you grow out of that as you grow older. You realize that some things aren't appropriate. Some people, for some reason, they don't like to talk about where they're from. Maybe they moved to Vietnam because their home life was not great. But I think if they don't tell you where they're from, just don't push it. And I asked some friends what the questions were that they would prefer not to be asked, And the number one question is always, are you married?
Sau đây một số câu hỏi mà người nước ngoài.
Yeah, so are you married is it's a fine question to ask if if we're curious. But following it up with, do you have a boyfriend, or why not, is not always the right thing to do. And I do get that, not only from my elementary school students, but sometimes from adults as well. I have no intention of getting married in the next 4 years. No way. I'm not interested. I don't want to. And I think that just the attitude towards marriage is very different now in the West than it is in Vietnam. And I like that there is this cultural difference. I think it's important, but also it can be hurtful to ask why you're not married, because it implies that there's something wrong. For example, if someone asks me, why am I not married, I say, because I broke up with my boyfriend and I moved to Vietnam, which is true, but other people may have a different story and not be so open to talking about it. If you're going to ask someone, are you married, then I would suggest that you don't follow up with any questions about why not afterwards, because it can be insensitive. Yeah, that's the number one question, because I asked a group of my friends and they all said the same thing. I sometimes get asked questions about my hair. Fine, I don't care. But sometimes there are other comments about the way I look, and sometimes they're a bit too personal, I think. For example, a lot of my students, because they're this high and they don't know how to be nice, they say, "Teacher, you have a big nose." And I'm like, I know, I'm aware, I'm used to it. But if someone was to say something else similar to that, I could get offended.